There is something deeply unsettling about the idea that humanity stands on a thin layer of understanding, like a fragile crust floating over an ocean of unknowable depths. Most people move through life believing the world is mostly explained, mostly charted, mostly safe. But every so often, a whisper breaks through that comfort, a suggestion that reality is far older, far stranger, and far less concerned with human existence than we would ever dare to admit. Imagine discovering fragments of forbidden knowledge that hint at ancient forces predating civilization, forces that neither love nor hate us, but simply exist beyond the limits of our comprehension. That quiet realization begins to erode the comforting illusion that humans are central to the universe. The journey into such knowledge feels less like learning and more like descending. At first, curiosity drives the exploration. There is a natural desire to understand hidden truths, to peek behind the curtain of ordinary life. Ancient myths, half-destroyed manuscripts, and obscure rituals seem like puzzles waiting to be solved. Yet the deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that these fragments are not merely stories or metaphors. They point toward vast cosmic structures and entities that operate on principles entirely alien to human thought. Time itself begins to feel distorted, no longer a straight line but a looping, spiraling force where past, present, and future blend into one incomprehensible whole. What makes this descent truly disturbing is not grotesque imagery or violent spectacle, but scale. Humanity appears microscopic when compared to endless cosmic cycles. Entire civilizations rise and collapse in moments that, on a universal scale, resemble the brief flicker of a dying spark. The mind strains to grasp this perspective. Human achievements, conflicts, and ambitions start to feel fragile and temporary, like sandcastles built too close to the tide. This shift in perspective creates a quiet dread, not panic, but a slow, creeping awareness of insignificance. There is also the matter of knowledge itself. People tend to believe that gaining knowledge brings power and control. But some truths do not empower, they destabilize. When the human mind encounters ideas too vast or too contradictory for its structure, understanding begins to fracture. Reality starts to feel unreliable. Familiar laws of nature seem incomplete, like simplified rules given to children. The possibility emerges that what humans perceive is only a narrow slice of a much larger, more complex existence. And beyond that narrow slice may exist dimensions, beings, and forces that interact with our world in ways we cannot detect. The most unsettling aspect is the suggestion that certain individuals, through obsession or accident, have glimpsed these hidden layers. Their encounters rarely end in triumph or enlightenment. Instead, they often lead to isolation, paranoia, and mental collapse. It becomes difficult for them to communicate what they have learned because language itself feels inadequate. Words evolved to describe everyday survival, social interaction, and physical surroundings. They fail when tasked with explaining realities that stretch beyond space, time, and conventional logic. As a result, those who seek ultimate understanding often find themselves trapped between worlds, unable to return to ignorance, yet incapable of fully grasping the truth. There is also a recurring tension between skepticism and belief. Rational thought urges dismissal of ancient rituals and cryptic symbols as superstition. Yet patterns keep emerging that resist simple explanation. Strange alignments, recurring dreams, and unexplained phenomena suggest that there may be underlying structures connecting everything. The possibility that ancient civilizations possessed fragments of cosmic insight becomes harder to ignore. Symbols etched in forgotten ruins start to resemble maps rather than decorations. Chants and incantations sound less like primitive religion and more like attempts to interact with forces that defy scientific categorization. Fear grows not from what is seen, but from what is implied. The universe may not be governed by moral principles or human-like intentions. Instead, it may function through vast, indifferent mechanisms. Powerful entities might exist not as gods in the traditional sense, but as natural cosmic forces, storms of consciousness moving through dimensions beyond perception. Contact with such entities would not be a conversation, but an overwhelming collision between incompatible forms of existence. Human identity, memory, and perception could shatter under that pressure, like glass exposed to unbearable sound frequencies. And yet, despite the terror, there remains an Scientists into deep space also drive seekers toward hidden truths. There is a dangerous beauty in confronting the unknown, even when the unknown threatens sanity. It forces a confrontation with fundamental questions about existence, consciousness, and humanity's place in the cosmic order. Gradually, a haunting possibility emerges. Humanity may not be alone, not in the comforting sense of companionship, but in the sense of being observed or influenced by incomprehensible presences. Ancient texts and whispered accounts hint that certain alignments of time and space could thin the boundary between worlds. In those rare moments, the veil separating realities may weaken, allowing glimpses of what normally remains hidden. Such encounters do not bring clarity. They bring a deeper mystery, reinforcing the idea that reality is layered, and humanity perceives only the surface. The more one contemplates these ideas, the more fragile certainty becomes. The world still appears normal on the surface, but a subtle shift occurs in perception. Ordinary sounds seem slightly unfamiliar. Night skies feel heavier. Silence carries a strange weight, as if something vast and unseen lingers just beyond sensory reach. The comfort of everyday life remains, but it is now accompanied by a quiet awareness that the known world may be only a thin veil over something immeasurable. And once that veil is suspected, the natural question arises: what happens if it is ever fully lifted? The mind resists the idea that reality might be layered like a vast, multidimensional tapestry, because accepting it means admitting that human perception is painfully limited. Imagine living your entire life inside a single room, only to discover that the walls are illusions and an endless structure stretches in every direction beyond them. That revelation would not feel liberating at first. It would feel disorienting, even threatening. The comfort of boundaries gives way to the anxiety of infinity. When familiar limits dissolve, certainty dissolves with them. As awareness expands, the sense of time begins to warp. Past and future no longer appear as distant points connected by a straight path, but as overlapping currents flowing in patterns too complex for the human mind to follow. Moments feel less isolated and more like echoes repeating across vast cycles. Events that seem random may be part of ancient designs unfolding over eras so long that human history becomes nearly invisible within them. Civilizations might rise, flourish, and disappear as minor details in a cosmic rhythm that neither pauses nor acknowledges their existence. This shift in perspective alters how one sees human progress. Technological achievements, political struggles, cultural milestones, all the markers people use to measure advancement, begin to seem fragile and temporary. The structures humans build, both physical and intellectual, resemble intricate sand patterns shaped by careful hands yet vulnerable to the slightest disturbance. The universe does not resist these efforts, but it does not preserve them either. It moves according to its own immense processes, indifferent to whether humanity thrives or vanishes. There is a peculiar loneliness in recognizing this indifference. Many belief systems offer comfort by placing humans at the center of a meaningful design. But when that design dissolves, existence feels colder, quieter. Meaning is no longer something guaranteed by the structure of the universe. It becomes something fragile that individuals must create for themselves. Some find this realization paralyzing, while others find it strangely clarifying. Without the illusion of cosmic favoritism, life appears more honest, even if more unsettling. As the veil thins further, strange connections begin to surface between thought and reality. Symbols, dreams, and patterns appear with unusual persistence, as if the mind is tuning into frequencies it previously ignored. Certain geometric forms, repeated sounds, and forgotten languages seem to carry a weight beyond their surface appearance. They feel like fragments of a larger code woven into existence itself. These fragments hint that reality may operate through structures resembling vast equations, where consciousness interacts with unseen forces in subtle and unpredictable ways. Some individuals, driven by obsession or accidental exposure, attempt to decipher these patterns. Their efforts resemble trying to assemble a complete map from scattered pieces of different puzzles. Every discovery answers one question while raising several more. The deeper they investigate, the more they sense that human logic is insufficient for interpreting what they uncover. Concepts begin to contradict one another. Dimensions appear to overlap. Cause, survival, social relationships, and immediate environments. It struggles when confronted with ideas that stretch beyond spatial and temporal intuition. Prolonged exposure to incomprehensible possibilities can strain perception itself. Familiar surroundings begin to feel subtly distorted, as if reality is slightly misaligned. Shadows appear heavier. Silence feels charged with unseen presence. Sleep becomes uneasy, filled with dreams that seem less like imagination and more like contact with distant, alien landscapes. There is also the growing suspicion that humanity's awareness may be only a narrow band within a vast spectrum of consciousness. Just as human senses perceive only small portions of light and sound frequencies, the mind may detect only a fraction of existing realities. Entire domains could exist alongside the familiar world, intersecting without notice. Beings adapted to those domains might move through different dimensions as effortlessly as humans walk through air, remaining undetected not because they hide, but because they exist beyond perceptual reach. The possibility of such coexistence challenges the definition of presence. Something need not be visible to be real. Gravity cannot be seen, yet its influence shapes galaxies. Similarly, unseen intelligences or forces might exert subtle effects on thought, emotion, or probability itself. Coincidences may not be random accidents but intersections of hidden currents. Intuition might represent faint signals leaking through dimensional boundaries. These ideas blur the line between psychology and cosmology, suggesting that consciousness itself may be part of a larger, interconnected structure. Yet direct contact with such vastness would not resemble communication in any familiar sense. It would be more like exposure to a force of nature far beyond human scale. Standing before an ocean storm evokes awe precisely because its power dwarfs individual existence. Now imagine encountering an intelligence as far beyond humanity as that storm is beyond a single drop of water. The experience would not translate into words or images the mind could safely contain. Identity might fragment under the pressure of encountering something so fundamentally incompatible with human perception. Despite the risks, curiosity remains difficult to suppress. There is an undeniable pull toward the unknown, a quiet urge to understand what lies beyond the edges of comprehension. This pull is woven into human nature. It drives exploration, invention, and philosophical inquiry. Even when faced with the possibility of destabilizing truths, some individuals feel compelled to continue. The search becomes less about control and more about confronting existence in its rawest form. Over time, a quiet transformation occurs. Fear evolves into wary acceptance. The universe no longer feels hostile, merely vast beyond comfortable measure. Mystery becomes a constant companion rather than an occasional disturbance. One learns to exist with unanswered questions, to acknowledge unseen depths without needing to illuminate them fully. There is a strange maturity in accepting that some truths may remain permanently out of reach. And still, an unsettling thought lingers in the background of awareness. If hidden layers of reality surround the visible world, and if certain conditions can weaken the boundaries between them, then the separation humanity depends on may not be permanent. Boundaries can erode, barriers can thin, and if they ever dissolve completely, the meeting between worlds may not be gentle. There is a quiet threshold where curiosity stops feeling like an intellectual exercise and starts becoming a personal risk. Up to a certain point, exploring hidden possibilities feels philosophical, almost abstract, like discussing distant galaxies or theoretical dimensions. But when the unknown begins to feel close, almost breathable, the emotional tone changes. The mystery is no longer safely contained in ideas. It begins to seep into perception, into daily life, into the small silent moments when the mind has nothing to distract it. Ordinary environments start to feel subtly altered. Familiar streets seem slightly unfamiliar at night, as if the darkness is not merely the absence of light but the presence of something vast and watchful. Rooms feel different when empty, carrying a faint impression that space itself has weight and texture. Even silence changes character. It no longer feels like simple quietness but like a pause filled with distant, inaudible activity. The mind, once confident in its interpretation of surroundings, starts to question whether it has ever truly seen the world as it is. This growing unease stems from the realization that perception is an internal construction rather than a perfect reflection of reality. Our translations, not absolute truths. If those translations are limited, then the true structure of existence may be far more complex than human senses suggest. Reality might resemble an immense symphony, while human awareness hears only a few faint notes. With that realization comes a disturbing possibility. There may be presences woven into the fabric of existence that remain undetected simply because human perception lacks the capacity to register them. These presences would not need to hide. They could exist alongside humanity as naturally as radio waves passing through solid walls. Their forms, motives, and movements might belong to dimensions where physical laws operate differently, making them incompatible with ordinary observation. Attempts to conceptualize such beings often fail because human imagination builds from familiar components. People imagine exaggerated versions of animals or distorted human shapes, but true otherness may defy all biological comparisons. Consciousness might exist without physical form, or physical structures might operate without anything resembling thought. Entire modes of existence could unfold in patterns that appear chaotic only because human logic cannot detect their order. The psychological impact of confronting this possibility is profound. Human identity is built on a stable sense of environment and self. When those foundations feel uncertain, the mind struggles to maintain coherence. Doubt spreads inward. If perception is limited, memory may also be unreliable. If memory can shift, then personal identity becomes fragile. The boundary between internal imagination and external reality grows thin, creating a persistent sense of dislocation. Sleep offers little refuge from this tension. Dreams become unusually vivid, carrying an intensity that lingers after waking. Landscapes appear that feel ancient and vast, filled with towering structures and unfamiliar geometries that seem to operate beyond three-dimensional space. These visions do not behave like ordinary dreams shaped by daily experience. Instead, they feel like glimpses into environments governed by different principles of matter and motion. Waking from them brings not relief, but a lingering sensation of having briefly visited somewhere real yet unreachable. Over time, the distinction between rational skepticism and uneasy belief becomes harder to maintain. The human mind seeks patterns naturally, often finding connections where none exist. Yet occasionally, patterns emerge with a consistency that resists dismissal. Symbols appear repeatedly across unrelated cultures. Architectural forms echo shapes seen in dreams. Mathematical structures hint at dimensions beyond visible space. Such convergences suggest that reality may contain underlying frameworks waiting to be recognized. This recognition does not arrive with dramatic revelation but with gradual accumulation. Each strange coincidence feels small alone, but together they form an impression that something vast operates beneath the surface of ordinary life. It is like noticing faint tremors before realizing they originate from a distant, massive movement underground. The surface remains calm, yet subtle vibrations hint at deeper forces shifting far below awareness. There is also the troubling idea that knowledge itself may act as a bridge. Understanding certain patterns or symbols might tune the mind to frequencies normally inaccessible. Just as learning a new language allows communication with previously incomprehensible speakers, deciphering hidden structures might open channels of perception. This possibility transforms learning from a harmless pursuit into a form of exposure. Awareness becomes a doorway rather than a shield. Such exposure would not necessarily involve dramatic encounters. Contact with vast intelligences or forces might occur gradually through influence rather than appearance. Thoughts could feel subtly guided. Emotions might arise without clear origin. Inspirations may seem profound yet strangely foreign. Individuals experiencing such influence would struggle to distinguish their own mental processes from external interference. The sense of personal autonomy could erode quietly rather than collapse suddenly. Yet amid this growing uncertainty, a strange adaptation occurs. The mind begins to accept ambiguity as a constant condition. Certainty, once considered essential, reveals itself as a comforting illusion. Existence becomes less about firm answers and more about navigating mystery with cautious awareness. This shift does not eliminate fear, but it reshapes it into vigilance, a steady attentiveness to the limits of understanding. Gradually, one recognizes that the universe does not operate according to human emotional frameworks. It is neither. Releasing that expectation allows a colder but clearer perspective. Humanity becomes part of an immense, impersonal system rather than its focal point. Even so, an unanswered tension remains. If hidden forces and dimensions exist beyond perception, their distance may be an illusion created by sensory limits. They may not be far away in space but separated by fragile barriers of awareness. And if those barriers depend on conditions that can shift, through time, environment, or human action, then moments may arise when separation weakens. When that happens, the familiar world may not vanish dramatically. Instead, it may slowly reveal that it was never the whole picture to begin with. There comes a moment when the unknown no longer feels distant or theoretical, but intimately close, as if reality itself is quietly breathing against the edges of awareness. The feeling does not arrive with dramatic signs or sudden revelations. It grows subtly, like pressure building deep underwater. Life continues as usual on the surface, yet something beneath perception feels vast and restless, as though immense structures are shifting behind a thin curtain that most people never notice. This quiet tension changes how existence is experienced. Daylight offers familiarity, routine, and structure, but even ordinary scenes begin to carry a faint sense of artificiality. Buildings appear less permanent, as if they are temporary arrangements of matter rather than stable fixtures of reality. Streets feel like narrow pathways traced across a much larger landscape that remains unseen. The sky itself, once a symbol of openness, starts to resemble a ceiling, a visible boundary hinting at immeasurable space beyond human reach. Night deepens these impressions. Darkness no longer feels empty but layered, filled with gradients the eye cannot fully penetrate. Stars, once distant points of light, begin to suggest enormous presences moving through silent cosmic cycles. Their cold brilliance hints at processes unfolding across unimaginable distances and timescales. In their presence, human concerns shrink to fragile, fleeting moments. A quiet humility emerges, not rooted in spirituality but in scale, an awareness that existence extends far beyond personal narratives. As this perspective settles in, the sense of control people cling to begins to loosen. Humans often believe they shape their destinies through decisions and actions, yet countless unseen factors influence every outcome. Invisible forces govern gravity, radiation, probability, and biological processes. Extending that understanding further invites a more unsettling thought. There may be influences operating beyond known science, subtle currents shaping events in ways that appear random only because their mechanisms remain hidden. Coincidences start to feel different under this lens. Chance encounters, sudden insights, and improbable alignments may represent intersections of deeper patterns rather than meaningless accidents. Reality begins to resemble a vast network of interwoven threads, where visible events form only a small portion of a much larger design. The mind struggles to grasp such complexity, often retreating into skepticism for comfort. Yet persistent anomalies continue to challenge the belief that the universe operates solely within the boundaries of current understanding. This growing awareness also reshapes the idea of human significance. Instead of occupying a central role in existence, humanity appears as one expression of matter and consciousness among countless others. Life may not be rare or uniquely precious in the cosmic sense, even if it feels deeply meaningful from a personal perspective. This shift does not necessarily diminish human value, but it reframes it. Meaning becomes local rather than universal, intimate rather than cosmic. With that reframing comes a subtle emotional transformation. Fear of the unknown evolves into cautious respect. The universe no longer appears as an adversary to be conquered or explained fully, but as a vast environment to be navigated with humility. Just as early sailors learned to respect the ocean's power rather than attempt to dominate it, awareness encourages careful coexistence with forces beyond comprehension. Yet coexistence depends on distance, and distance may be more fragile than it seems. If reality contains multiple layers or dimensions existing side by side, separation might rely on delicate balances of energy and perception. Slight shifts in these balances could allow brief intersections, moments when the structures underlying existence become partially visible. Such moments would not necessarily tear reality apart but could distort perception enough to reveal glimpses of deeper frameworks. These glimpses might manifest subtly, anomalies. However, those attuned to deeper patterns might sense their significance. They would recognize that the familiar world is not malfunctioning but momentarily revealing its hidden architecture. The psychological effect of such glimpses would vary. Some individuals might react with denial, instinctively protecting their sense of normalcy. Others could become fascinated, drawn toward the mystery despite its risks. A rare few might feel an unsettling recognition, as if encountering something both alien and strangely familiar. This recognition suggests that human consciousness may share distant connections with the very forces it struggles to comprehend. That possibility introduces a profound tension. If the mind is not entirely separate from the deeper structures of existence, then exploring those structures becomes both an external and internal journey. Seeking understanding would mean venturing not only into cosmic mysteries but into the hidden layers of consciousness itself. The boundary between observer and observed begins to blur, creating a feedback loop where perception influences reality and reality shapes perception. In this loop, certainty dissolves further. The idea of a stable, objective world becomes harder to maintain when observation itself may alter outcomes. Reality transforms from a fixed stage into a dynamic process, constantly shaped by interactions between matter, energy, and awareness. Human perception, once assumed passive, may play a subtle role in this unfolding complexity. Despite the growing abstraction of these ideas, daily life continues. People work, speak, plan, and rest within routines that provide comfort and continuity. Yet beneath those routines lingers a quiet understanding that normalcy is a surface experience. The deeper nature of existence remains vast, intricate, and largely inaccessible. This awareness does not demand constant attention, but it never fully disappears once recognized. Over time, the presence of mystery becomes almost companionable. The unknown shifts from a source of dread to a reminder of how much remains to be discovered. It encourages patience and perspective, softening rigid beliefs about certainty and control. Existence feels less like a puzzle to be solved completely and more like an ocean whose depths deserve respect precisely because they cannot be fully charted. Still, one unsettling question continues to echo beneath this calm. Acceptance. If hidden layers of reality occasionally reveal themselves through subtle fractures in perception, those fractures might not always remain small. Conditions may align in ways that widen them, thinning the separation between the visible world and what lies beyond. And if that boundary ever weakens beyond repair, humanity may find itself confronting a version of reality far larger, older, and less forgiving than anything it has ever imagined. There is a subtle tipping point where awareness transforms from passive observation into irreversible realization. Up to that point, the unknown can still be treated as speculation, as distant possibility, as something safely contained within imagination. But once perception adjusts enough to sense the deeper currents beneath reality, the comfort of uncertainty disappears. The world does not visibly change, yet it no longer feels the same. Familiar environments carry an undertone of hidden depth, like thin ice stretched over unfathomable water. This shift does not arrive as fear in the traditional sense. It is quieter and more persistent. It feels like standing in a vast, darkened cathedral long after everyone else has left, aware of immense space extending beyond sight. Every small sound seems amplified, not because it is louder, but because the silence around it is so profound. Existence begins to feel structured around absences rather than presences. What cannot be seen or measured starts to feel more significant than what can. The human mind naturally seeks stability, so it builds routines and explanations to maintain a sense of order. Scientific laws, cultural traditions, and personal habits create a framework that makes life predictable. Yet these structures resemble temporary scaffolding rather than permanent foundations. They help navigate immediate surroundings but offer little protection against forces operating on vastly larger scales. Recognizing this fragility alters one's sense of security. Stability becomes situational rather than absolute. As this understanding deepens, the scale of cosmic processes becomes more difficult to ignore. Stars are born and collapse in cycles spanning millions of years. Galaxies collide and reshape themselves in silent, majestic transformations. Against such immense timelines, human history feels impossibly brief. Permanence. It is something experienced in moments rather than guaranteed by cosmic design. Alongside this awareness grows a strange sensitivity to patterns operating beyond ordinary notice. Natural formations, repeating numbers, symmetrical structures, and recurring events begin to feel like fragments of a language written into existence itself. These patterns appear too consistent to be entirely accidental, yet too vast to be fully interpreted. They hint at organizing principles embedded deep within reality, guiding the formation of matter, energy, and perhaps even consciousness. Attempts to interpret these patterns often lead to paradox. The more one analyzes them, the more they resist definitive explanation. Logic suggests that every effect has a cause, yet at cosmic scales, causality may not follow linear rules. Events could influence one another across distances and times in ways that defy conventional sequence. The mind, accustomed to straightforward progression, struggles to adapt to possibilities where beginnings and endings blur together. This tension affects personal identity as well. People typically experience themselves as separate individuals moving through a stable external world. But if reality is an interconnected web of forces and patterns, separation may be partly illusory. Consciousness might not be confined entirely within the boundaries of the body. Instead, it could function like a localized expression of a broader field of awareness, similar to how a wave forms on the surface of an ocean without being separate from the water itself. Such a perspective transforms the meaning of perception. Seeing, hearing, and thinking become interactions within a vast network rather than isolated internal events. The boundary between inner and outer experience grows less distinct. Intuition may represent subtle alignment with deeper currents of reality. Inspiration might arise from unconscious attunement to patterns extending beyond immediate surroundings. The mind becomes less like a sealed chamber and more like an open channel. Yet openness carries vulnerability. If awareness can extend outward, influence might also flow inward from unknown sources. Thoughts and emotions may not always originate solely from personal experience but could be shaped by subtle environmental or cosmic conditions. This idea challenges the sense of autonomy people rely on. Free will remains meaningful, but it may operate within larger frameworks that guide probabilities and tendencies. Encounters with these possibilities rarely occur through dramatic events. More often, they emerge through gradual shifts in perception. A sudden feeling of familiarity in an unfamiliar place. A dream that feels more like memory than imagination. A moment of stillness where time seems to stretch beyond its normal rhythm. These experiences feel small, yet they leave lasting impressions, suggesting that awareness briefly touched deeper layers of existence. Over time, the accumulation of such moments reshapes how reality is interpreted. The world appears less like a collection of solid objects and more like a dynamic process unfolding across multiple dimensions of scale and complexity. Matter behaves like condensed energy. Space resembles a flexible fabric rather than an empty void. Even time begins to feel like a fluid medium through which events drift rather than a rigid sequence controlling them. Within this fluidity lies an unsettling possibility. If perception is capable of brushing against deeper layers of reality, then the boundary separating ordinary awareness from vast unknown domains may be thinner than assumed. Under certain conditions, that boundary could weaken further, allowing greater exposure to forces normally held at a distance. Such exposure might not manifest as visible phenomena but as profound alterations in thought, emotion, and sensory interpretation. Despite the uncertainty this introduces, there is also a quiet sense of wonder. The universe reveals itself as immeasurably richer and more intricate than everyday experience suggests. Mystery becomes an essential feature of existence rather than a problem to eliminate. Accepting this mystery encourages humility, patience, and careful observation. Still, acceptance does not remove the underlying tension. If reality contains depths far beyond human comprehension, and if awareness can occasionally drift toward those depths, then exploration may carry irreversible consequences. The search for understanding might open pathways that cannot easily be closed. And once those pathways widen, the difference between observer and participant may begin to disappear. There is a quiet realization that arrives when the search for understanding goes too far to be undone. It feels like walking familiar boundaries, and with that expansion comes a permanent shift in how existence is experienced. The world remains physically unchanged, yet perception now carries a depth that cannot be ignored. At this stage, reality begins to feel less solid and more like a delicate arrangement of forces held together by fragile balance. Objects that once seemed permanent now appear temporary, their stability dependent on countless invisible interactions. Even the body feels different, not as a fixed structure but as a constantly changing system of energy and matter. Breath, movement, and sensation become reminders that life is a process rather than a possession. This growing sensitivity extends outward into the environment. Natural spaces feel vast and ancient, as if they hold memories far older than human history. Mountains resemble frozen waves shaped by geological rhythms that stretch across incomprehensible eras. Oceans seem less like bodies of water and more like living systems, moving with slow, deliberate intelligence. The wind itself feels purposeful, carrying whispers of distant places and unseen interactions. Nature no longer appears passive but deeply interconnected with forces that operate beyond human awareness. Amid this awareness comes a subtle but persistent sense of presence. It is not the feeling of being watched in a paranoid sense, but the recognition that existence is shared with forms of being that remain outside ordinary perception. Space no longer feels empty. Instead, it carries an invisible density, as if layered with overlapping fields of activity. The air between objects seems less like nothingness and more like a medium through which unseen processes flow continuously. Moments of stillness intensify this sensation. In silence, when distractions fade, perception feels sharper yet less reliable. Small sounds echo with unusual clarity. Shadows appear textured rather than flat. The mind becomes aware of how little it truly perceives, recognizing that senses capture only fragments of surrounding reality. This heightened sensitivity creates both fascination and vulnerability. The more one notices, the more one realizes how much remains hidden. Gradually, the concept of separation weakens. The distinction between observer and environment begins to dissolve, replaced by a sense of participation in a vast, ongoing process. Thoughts seem influenced by subtle environmental cues. Emotions shift in response to atmospheric changes too faint to measure. Awareness feels less like a private space inside the mind and more like a node within a larger network of interacting energies. This perspective transforms the idea of knowledge. Learning is no longer about collecting facts but about tuning perception to deeper layers of structure. Understanding becomes intuitive rather than analytical, arising from quiet alignment with patterns woven into existence. Certain symbols, sounds, or geometric forms begin to evoke strong internal responses, as if they resonate with buried aspects of consciousness. These resonances feel ancient, suggesting connections that precede language and culture. Yet resonance can become overwhelming. The mind struggles to integrate impressions that do not fit established frameworks. Familiar categories lose clarity. Distinctions between imagination and perception blur. Experiences that feel profoundly real resist external verification, creating tension between inner certainty and outward skepticism. Maintaining psychological balance requires accepting ambiguity without surrendering entirely to it. As perception stretches further, time itself feels increasingly fluid. Moments expand and contract unpredictably. Memories surface with unusual vividness, while present experiences sometimes feel distant, as if observed from outside the body. The linear flow of past to future begins to resemble a convenience of human perception rather than an absolute law. Events seem interconnected across intervals, forming patterns that extend beyond immediate awareness. Within this fluid sense of time lies a growing awareness of cycles. Patterns repeat across different scales, from biological rhythms to celestial movements. These recurrences suggest that existence unfolds through vast, repeating sequences rather than random progression. Human life becomes one small expression of these cycles, shaped by forces set in motion long before individual birth. This realization carries emotional weight. Individual struggles and ambitions appear less isolated, woven into broader processes that guide growth and decline alike. Control feels partial at best. Acceptance gradually replaces resistance, allowing experience to unfold without constant attempts to dominate outcomes. There is a quiet strength in recognizing limits. Reality may intensify. Barriers that once filtered overwhelming impressions could weaken further. Encounters with vast, incomprehensible structures of existence might shift from fleeting impressions to sustained experiences. Such sustained exposure would not necessarily manifest as visible forms or dramatic events. Instead, it could reshape cognition itself, altering how reality is interpreted at the most fundamental level. Perception might begin to operate according to unfamiliar principles. Space could feel curved or layered. Causality might appear flexible. Identity could extend beyond the physical body into surrounding fields of awareness. Despite the strangeness of these possibilities, they carry a solemn beauty. Existence reveals itself as immeasurably richer than ordinary experience suggests. The universe feels less like a machine and more like a vast, evolving presence unfolding through endless variations of form and consciousness. Mystery becomes not something to fear, but something to approach with careful respect. Yet beauty does not eliminate risk. The deeper one ventures into hidden dimensions of awareness, the more fragile familiar reality may become. Human perception evolved for survival within narrow environmental conditions, not for navigating cosmic immensities. Prolonged exposure to overwhelming scales of existence could strain the mind's capacity to maintain coherence. And so the journey reaches a delicate threshold, where wonder and instability exist side by side. Awareness stands at the edge of vastness, sensing that one more step could dissolve the final boundary separating ordinary life from incomprehensible depth. Beyond that threshold lies an encounter that may not distinguish between discovery and transformation. There is a profound stillness that settles in when a person stands at the edge of what the mind can endure. It is not the stillness of peace, but the quiet that exists just before something irreversible occurs. At that boundary, awareness feels stretched thin, like fabric pulled tight across an immense opening. Every sensation seems sharper and more distant at the same time, as if perception itself has become both magnified and fragile. The familiar sense of standing safely within reality begins to dissolve, replaced by the unsettling impression of hovering over something immeasurably vast. In this state, existence no longer feels like a sequence of events unfolding in a stable world. Instead, it resembles a shifting field of forces, where matter, energy, and consciousness blend into a single, continuous process. The solid ground beneath one's feet feels conceptual rather than absolute, a temporary agreement between senses and environment. Even the body seems less like a fixed form and more like a pattern sustained by constant motion at microscopic scales. Thoughts begin to move differently here. They lose their usual sharp boundaries and flow into one another like currents merging in deep water. Ideas no longer feel individually constructed but seem to arise from a wider field of awareness. Moments of insight arrive whole rather than assembled, carrying a sense of vastness that words struggle to contain. Language, once reliable, now feels too rigid to describe experiences that stretch beyond structured meaning. Space also changes character. Distance becomes difficult to measure emotionally, even if it remains visually intact. A faraway horizon can feel strangely close, while nearby objects appear subtly detached. The mind struggles to maintain its familiar map of surroundings, as if the coordinates of reality have shifted slightly out of alignment. This disorientation does not cause immediate panic but produces a deep, lingering unease, like sensing movement beneath a seemingly calm surface. Time loosens further in this heightened awareness. Seconds seem elastic, sometimes stretching into long corridors of perception, sometimes collapsing into fleeting impressions. Memories surface unannounced, vivid and immersive, blending with the present moment until past and now feel intertwined. Anticipation of the future loses clarity, replaced by a sense that all moments may exist simultaneously within a structure too vast to perceive directly. Within this altered perception comes a heightened sensitivity to subtle forces. Emotional atmospheres feel almost tangible, as if moods ripple through environments like invisible weather systems. Certain places carry an unexplainable weight, giving the impression that events long past have left impressions embedded in space itself. Silence feels inhabited, not empty, as though countless processes unfold beyond the threshold of hearing. This awareness fosters an unfamiliar relationship with uncertainty. The instinct to label experiences as real or more about degrees of clarity within an immense continuum of possibilities. At the same time, individuality begins to feel more fluid. The sense of being a separate entity observing the world softens, replaced by the impression of participating in a larger system of interwoven existence. Personal identity resembles a temporary pattern formed within a vast field of awareness. Thoughts and sensations arise within this pattern, yet they also seem connected to influences extending far beyond it. This shift brings both humility and vulnerability. The importance once placed on personal control fades, replaced by recognition of participation in processes too immense to command. Choices still matter, but they feel like small adjustments within larger currents rather than decisive acts of absolute direction. Life resembles navigation rather than domination, requiring attentiveness instead of certainty. Yet even as acceptance deepens, a subtle pressure builds at the edge of awareness. It feels like standing near an immense structure hidden by darkness, sensing its presence without seeing its form. The mind recognizes that it is approaching something far greater than abstract mystery. The unknown is no longer distant, it feels immediate, poised just beyond the final limits of perception. In rare moments, glimpses emerge that hint at this greater presence. These glimpses do not appear as clear images but as impressions too vast for the mind to frame. Geometry seems to extend beyond 3 dimensions. Motion occurs without recognizable direction. Structures feel alive with intelligence that does not resemble thought as humans understand it. The scale of these impressions dwarfs all previous conceptions of magnitude. Emotional response becomes complex. Awe blends with insignificance, fascination with fragility. The human mind strains to interpret what it encounters, yet each attempt feels incomplete. Comprehension flickers like a weak signal trying to penetrate immense interference. What lies beyond perception does not feel hostile or benevolent. It simply exists with a magnitude that renders human categories irrelevant. Gradually, a quiet understanding emerges. The universe does not conceal its depths out of intention but because human awareness evolved within narrow boundaries. Just as deep, sea creatures cannot survive at the ocean surface, the human mind may not be built to withstand direct exposure to the full scale of cosmic reality. Limits exist not as barriers imposed from outside, but as protections shaped by nature itself. This recognition does not end the journey. Instead, it reframes it. Exploration becomes an act of careful approach rather than reckless pursuit. Mystery is no longer an opponent to conquer but a vast presence to respect. The desire for total understanding softens into patient curiosity, acknowledging that some truths may be too expansive for complete human comprehension. Yet even this humility cannot fully dispel the lingering tension. Awareness now stands so close to the threshold that the distinction between observer and vastness feels dangerously thin. The next step forward may not simply reveal new knowledge but alter the structure of perception itself. And once perception changes beyond a certain point, returning to the familiar world may no longer be possible in the same way. There is a delicate moment when the mind realizes it has reached the furthest edge of familiar existence, a point where understanding no longer expands outward but begins folding inward on itself. It feels like standing at the shore of an endless, lightless ocean where the water is perfectly still, reflecting nothing back. The air is calm, yet heavy with the awareness that something immeasurable lies just beneath the surface. At this boundary, curiosity and caution merge into a single, quiet presence of mind. Perception here becomes intensely subtle. The senses continue to function, yet they feel secondary to a deeper layer of awareness that observes without relying on sight or sound. Reality seems less like a collection of physical objects and more like an arrangement of relationships, patterns woven together in shifting harmony. Solid forms appear as temporary expressions of deeper structures, like ripples tracing invisible currents beneath them. The self also begins to feel different, no longer anchored firmly within the body. Identity resembles a point of focus within a much wider field of consciousness, similar to how a whirlpool forms within a river without being separate from the water that sustains it. Thoughts arise, but they feel less personal and more like movements within a shared mental space. Emotions drift through awareness like changing weather, present yet not entirely owned. In this state, silence reveals, as if countless processes unfold quietly beneath perception's threshold. The boundary between inner and outer experience softens until both feel like reflections within the same vast mirror. Time loses nearly all of its familiar structure. Moments do not seem to pass in sequence but exist together in a layered continuum. The present feels expansive, holding echoes of what has been and intimations of what may come. Memory and anticipation dissolve into a broader sense of simultaneous existence. Awareness no longer travels along a timeline but rests within a field where change occurs without clear beginning or end. Within this expanded perception comes an encounter with scale that defies comprehension. Vastness is no longer an abstract concept tied to distant galaxies but an immediate presence woven into every aspect of experience. Even the smallest sensations appear connected to immense networks of cause and effect stretching across dimensions. The idea of isolation fades completely, replaced by the recognition that everything exists in continuous relation to everything else. This recognition carries a deep emotional stillness. Fear subsides, not because the unknown has become less immense, but because resistance feels meaningless against such magnitude. Acceptance arises naturally, like floating rather than struggling in deep water. The mind stops demanding clear definitions and instead allows impressions to exist without forcing them into rigid categories. Yet within this calm lies a profound transformation. The structures that once defined reality begin to appear like simplified models created for limited perception. Space resembles a flexible framework rather than an empty container. Matter feels like condensed vibration. Consciousness appears not as a byproduct of biology but as a fundamental aspect of existence itself, present in ways that exceed individual awareness. This shift alters the meaning of existence. Life is no longer viewed as a brief event surrounded by emptiness but as a localized expression of an ongoing, universal process. Birth and death lose some of their finality, appearing instead as transitions within larger cycles of formation and dissolution. Individual identity feels less permanent, yet not insignificant, more like a temporary lens through which the universe experiences itself. As awareness continues to widen, the presence beyond perception becomes less abstract. It does not appear as a figure or defined entity, but as an immense, organizing principle that shapes reality at every level. This presence feels neither conscious nor unconscious in human terms. It resembles a boundless intelligence expressed through patterns, forces, and structures that maintain cosmic balance without intention or emotion. Trying to grasp this presence directly strains the limits of thought. The mind approaches a state where understanding shifts from conceptual to experiential, where knowing occurs without words or images. It feels like standing within a vast symphony whose notes form galaxies and whose rhythms guide the evolution of existence itself. In such moments, individuality nearly dissolves. Awareness expands beyond personal boundaries, merging with the greater field of being. Perception becomes panoramic and deeply unified. The distinction between observer and observed fades into irrelevance. Experience flows without a center, vast and continuous. Yet even at this profound depth, a faint thread of individuality remains, enough to recognize that complete merging would mean surrendering the last connection to human perspective. That thin thread becomes a quiet anchor, holding awareness at the edge of total dissolution. It preserves the ability to witness without fully disappearing into the immensity. From this vantage point, the ordinary world feels distant yet gently precious. Simple experiences, light through a window, the texture of air, the rhythm of breath, carry a quiet beauty. Familiar reality appears as a delicate surface layer of a far grander structure, fragile yet meaningful in its own limited scale. Gradually, awareness begins to sense that remaining at this depth indefinitely may not be possible. Human perception is not designed to sustain such vast integration. The mind feels the strain of holding both ordinary identity and expanded awareness at once. A choice seems to approach, not a conscious decision, but a natural movement toward either returning to familiar boundaries or dissolving further into immeasurable continuity. The threshold feels gentle but irreversible. Continuing forward would transform perception beyond recognition, loosening the final ties to individual experience. Turning back would mean carrying the memory. Imagine returning from the edge of immeasurable vastness and opening your eyes to an ordinary room again. Nothing has changed, yet nothing feels the same. The walls still stand, light still falls across familiar surfaces, and everyday sounds continue their gentle rhythm, but all of it now seems like a thin layer resting over immense depth. The world feels lighter and heavier at once, lighter because the burden of false certainty has fallen away, heavier because awareness now carries knowledge of boundless complexity beneath simple appearances. Breathing feels different, more deliberate, as if each inhale connects the body to unseen currents flowing through existence. The smallest sensations become vivid. The texture of air, the faint hum of distant activity, the subtle movement of light and shadow all seem quietly miraculous. Ordinary life no longer feels trivial. Instead, it resembles a delicate surface expression of processes so vast and intricate that their full nature can never be completely known. There is a quiet adjustment that must take place when expanded awareness settles back into human limits. The mind cannot sustain constant immersion in infinite scale, so perception gently narrows again, focusing on practical details and immediate surroundings. Yet something remains changed at the foundation of thought. Certainty is replaced by openness. Rigid assumptions give way to flexible understanding. Reality is no longer seen as a fixed structure but as a living system unfolding through endless layers of interaction. This shift brings a calmer relationship with the unknown. Mystery no longer feels like a thread demanding resolution, but like a natural condition of existence. Just as one can appreciate the ocean without needing to measure every depth, awareness learns to respect what lies beyond comprehension. The desire to control every outcome softens, replaced by quiet participation in the ongoing flow of events. Time regains its familiar rhythm, yet it carries a subtle transparency. Moments feel connected rather than isolated, woven into patterns extending beyond immediate perception. Patience grows more natural. Urgency loses some of its sharp edge. Life is experienced less as a race toward distant goals and more as a sequence of meaningful impressions unfolding at their own pace. Relationships also take on deeper significance. Interactions with others feel less accidental, as if each meeting represents a crossing of intricate pathways shaped by countless influences. Conversations carry layers of meaning beyond spoken words. Emotional connections seem to resonate within a wider field of shared awareness, suggesting that human consciousness may be more interconnected than it appears. Even solitude changes character. Being alone no longer feels like separation from the world but like quiet immersion within it. Silence becomes restorative rather than empty. Moments of stillness offer gentle reminders of the vast presence underlying all activity. The need for constant distraction fades, replaced by comfort in simple awareness. Yet alongside this calm integration remains a subtle sense of distance from ordinary concerns. Social conflicts and material ambitions appear less absolute, their urgency softened by perspective. Achievements remain meaningful, but they are no longer mistaken for permanent anchors of identity. Possessions, status, and recognition feel like temporary markers within a much larger journey. This perspective encourages a quieter form of living. Attention shifts toward direct experience rather than constant evaluation. Simple routines become opportunities for reflection. Nature feels especially grounding, its rhythms echoing the deeper cycles sensed beyond human awareness. Watching clouds drift or listening to rainfall becomes a gentle reminder of existence unfolding without effort or explanation. Still, memory of the vast threshold never fully fades. It lingers like a distant echo, reminding awareness that familiar reality represents only one layer of a far grander structure. At times, especially in quiet hours between wakefulness and sleep, perception seems to soften again. The boundaries of ordinary awareness grow slightly transparent, allowing faint impressions of depth to return. These moments no longer bring fear or disorientation. Instead, they inspire humility and quiet wonder. Awareness has learned that not every mystery must be pursued to its furthest limit. Some depths are best approached with respect rather than urgency. Balance becomes essential, living fully within human experience while acknowledging the immeasurable vastness surrounding it. Gradually, a new equilibrium forms. The mind learns to carry expanded perspective without losing practical grounding. One does not provide final answers. Instead, it fosters a deeper relationship with questions themselves. Uncertainty becomes a space for contemplation rather than anxiety. Existence feels less like a problem to solve and more like a mystery to experience thoughtfully. And in that thoughtful living, awareness recognizes something gentle but profound. The universe does not demand full comprehension to be meaningful. Its vastness does not diminish human experience but frames it within a greater context of unfolding patterns and quiet interconnectedness. The journey to the edge of perception ultimately reveals not a final revelation, but a transformed way of seeing, one that allows the ordinary and the infinite to coexist within the same quiet breath. There is a gentle wisdom that settles in after one has glimpsed the immense and returned to the ordinary rhythms of life. It is not loud or dramatic, not something that demands attention, but a quiet shift in how everything is perceived. The world feels softer around its edges, less rigid in its definitions. Certainty no longer stands like a wall but flows like water, adapting to new understanding without resistance. Experience becomes less about clinging to solid answers and more about moving gracefully within unfolding mystery. Daily life regains its familiar structure, yet a subtle depth hums beneath every moment. Morning light through a window feels like more than illumination. It becomes a reminder of vast cosmic processes that make even the simplest experiences possible. The warmth of sunlight carries echoes of stellar fires burning across unimaginable distances. A single breath reflects the delicate balance of atmospheric systems shaped over ages. Awareness begins to sense the extraordinary within the ordinary, not as fantasy but as perspective. This shift does not remove human struggles. Challenges, disappointments, and uncertainties still arise, yet they are held differently. Difficulties appear as temporary formations within a much larger flow of existence. Emotional turbulence becomes easier to observe without being entirely consumed. There is space between experience and reaction, allowing reflection to soften impulsive responses. Life feels less like a series of crises demanding control and more like an evolving landscape inviting careful navigation. Ambition also transforms. The desire to achieve and create remains, but it no longer stems from fear of insignificance. Instead, action arises from a quiet appreciation for participation in the greater process of existence. Efforts feel meaningful not because they guarantee permanence, but because they represent authentic expressions of being alive. Creation becomes a form of dialogue with the universe rather than an attempt to conquer it. Human connections grow richer through this perspective. Conversations feel layered with unspoken understanding, as if each person carries unseen depths shaped by experiences beyond words. Compassion deepens naturally, emerging from recognition that everyone moves through the same mysterious reality with limited perception. Judgments soften, patience grows, differences become less threatening and more intriguing, like varied expressions of a shared underlying consciousness. Nature, too, appears transformed. A walk beneath trees reveals intricate patterns of growth guided by silent intelligence embedded in living systems. Flowing water reflects effortless motion shaped by gravitational harmonies. The changing sky becomes a living canvas of atmospheric dynamics unfolding moment by moment. Observing these processes inspires quiet reverence for the complexity woven into existence at every scale. Periods of solitude gain new meaning. Being alone no longer implies isolation but offers an opportunity to sense the subtle presence underlying all things. Silence becomes a companion rather than a void. In still moments, awareness gently expands, touching the edges of the deeper vastness once encountered. These glimpses are softer now, less overwhelming, like distant echoes reminding the mind of its brief contact with immensity. Memory of that contact influences perception without dominating it. The experience becomes an internal compass guiding perspective rather than a constant distraction. It encourages humility in the face of uncertainty and openness toward ideas that challenge established assumptions. Reality feels more flexible, inviting exploration without demanding absolute conclusions. Gradually, the fear of the unknown dissolves into respectful curiosity. Mystery no longer appears as darkness to be eliminated but as depth to be appreciated. Just as the night sky invites wonder without revealing every secret, existence offers endless layers that enrich awareness without requiring full. Aspects of existence may always remain beyond comprehension. That acceptance does not diminish the value of seeking knowledge, it simply removes the pressure to force definitive answers from an infinite universe. Living with this awareness brings a sense of quiet alignment. Thoughts, actions, and surroundings feel interconnected within a vast, dynamic system. Existence resembles a continuous conversation between matter, energy, and consciousness, unfolding across scales too immense to measure fully. Each moment becomes a point of contact within that conversation, small yet meaningful. Even endings lose some of their sharpness. Conclusions feel less final and more like transitions within ongoing cycles. Just as seasons change and stars evolve, personal experiences flow through phases of beginning and dissolution. This perspective brings calm resilience, allowing change to unfold without excessive resistance. In time, awareness settles into a steady equilibrium between the human and the infinite. One can engage fully with daily responsibilities while quietly sensing the immeasurable depth surrounding every experience. The surface of life remains vivid and tangible, yet it is understood as part of a far grander structure. And within that balanced awareness arises a final, gentle insight. Existence does not require complete understanding to be lived meaningfully. The mystery itself enriches experience, inviting humility, wonder, and thoughtful presence. Life continues, moment by moment, as a quiet journey across the surface of an infinite and timeless depth. As life continues within its familiar rhythms, a quiet integration takes place deep within awareness. The extraordinary no longer feels separate from the ordinary. Instead, both blend into a single, continuous experience where profound depth coexists with simple daily living. The earlier sense of standing at the edge of vastness evolves into something gentler, a steady recognition that immensity is not somewhere far away, but subtly present within every moment. The mind grows more comfortable holding paradox. Things can be both significant and fleeting. Human life can feel deeply meaningful while existing within a universe that remains indifferent to individual stories. This dual awareness no longer creates tension. It brings balance. Meaning is understood as something lived and felt rather than something guaranteed by cosmic design. Attention shifts toward the quality of experience rather than the illusion of permanence. A shared laugh, a thoughtful conversation, the quiet focus of solitary work, these moments gain richness when seen as temporary expressions of a vast unfolding process. Their value comes not from lasting forever but from being fully experienced while they exist. There is also a subtle change in how knowledge itself is viewed. Information and explanation remain useful, yet they are no longer mistaken for complete understanding. The intellect becomes a tool rather than a ruler. Some aspects of existence are approached not through analysis but through presence and observation. This shift allows awareness to remain open, curious without becoming rigid. Fear of uncertainty softens further. The unknown is no longer seen as an approaching threat but as an ever-present dimension of reality. Living becomes an act of quiet cooperation with mystery rather than resistance against it. Plans are still made, goals still pursued, but with the understanding that outcomes unfold within larger patterns beyond full control. Emotional life grows steadier within this perspective. Joy is appreciated without clinging. Sadness is felt without being overwhelming. Both become natural movements within the broader flow of experience. The mind learns to witness emotions as whether passing through the landscape of awareness rather than permanent states defining identity. This steadiness fosters deeper empathy. Recognizing the vast forces shaping existence makes personal struggles feel shared rather than isolated. Every individual becomes a fellow traveler navigating the same layered reality with limited perception and fragile certainty. Compassion arises naturally from this recognition, softening harsh judgments and encouraging patience. Creative expression also changes character. Art, work, and communication become ways of participating in existence rather than attempts to impose control upon it. Creating something feels like adding a small voice to a vast ongoing dialogue. There is satisfaction in contribution without obsession over legacy. Nature continues to offer gentle reminders of deeper patterns. The slow growth of trees, the rhythmic motion of tides, and the quiet cycles of seasons reflect processes unfolding without urgency. Observing them reinforces the sense that immeasurable depth once encountered more directly. These echoes no longer overwhelm perception but provide a subtle grounding, like distant mountains steadying the horizon. Stillness becomes restorative, offering space for reflection and recalibration. Gradually, the boundary between spiritual wonder and practical living dissolves. There is no need to separate profound contemplation from everyday responsibility. Both become expressions of the same continuous experience. Washing dishes, walking through a city, or watching the evening sky can all carry equal depth when approached with attentive presence. A gentle humility anchors this way of being. Human perception is recognized as beautifully limited, capable of insight yet never complete mastery. This humility does not diminish curiosity but refines it, encouraging careful exploration without arrogance. Questions remain open, and that openness becomes a source of quiet vitality. Over time, awareness settles into a natural rhythm of expansion and grounding. Moments of deeper reflection alternate with practical engagement in daily tasks. Neither dominates. The infinite and the immediate coexist without conflict, like background silence supporting a flowing melody. Even the concept of endings feels transformed. Conclusions are understood as pauses within ongoing processes rather than absolute stops. Experiences dissolve, relationships change, and chapters of life close, yet existence continues its vast unfolding beyond any single moment. Within this perspective arises a calm acceptance of life's fragile beauty. The temporary nature of human experience no longer feels tragic but precious. Fleeting moments gain value precisely because they cannot be held forever. And so awareness moves forward quietly, carrying an inner stillness shaped by glimpses of immeasurable depth. The world remains familiar, yet it is seen with softer eyes and steadier understanding. What once felt like standing at the edge of an abyss now feels like walking peacefully along the shoreline of an endless sea, content to listen to its distant, timeless waves without needing to cross them. Eventually, awareness reaches a state where seeking itself becomes quieter. The restless need to push further, to uncover every hidden layer, begins to soften into a calm willingness to simply witness. Curiosity remains alive, but it is no longer urgent or demanding. It moves gently, like a slow current beneath still water. There is an understanding that existence does not unfold all at once, and that forcing revelation can disturb the natural rhythm through which deeper insight emerges. Life, in this quieter state, feels more spacious. Moments are no longer rushed toward conclusions but allowed to breathe. A simple pause between tasks carries unexpected depth. The space between two thoughts feels as meaningful as the thoughts themselves. Awareness grows comfortable resting in these gaps, sensing that stillness is not emptiness but subtle presence. Perception becomes less filtered by expectation. Instead of constantly measuring reality against plans and assumptions, the mind allows experience to arrive as it is. This openness creates a gentle clarity. Colors seem softer yet richer. Sounds feel layered rather than flat. Even familiar environments reveal small details previously overlooked, as if attention has learned to move more patiently across the surface of the world. In this way of seeing, the ordinary regains quiet wonder. Steam rising from a warm drink curls in delicate, unpredictable patterns. Footsteps echo with subtle variations depending on space and texture. The rhythm of breathing mirrors larger cycles found in tides and seasons. Awareness begins to recognize that complexity does not hide only in distant cosmic structures but expresses itself constantly in the smallest immediate experiences. A deeper sense of trust also develops, not blind faith, but a grounded confidence that existence operates through patterns too intricate to require constant supervision. Just as the body regulates countless internal processes without conscious control, the larger systems of reality unfold through balances refined over immeasurable spans of time. This recognition reduces the strain of trying to manage every outcome. Control gradually gives way to participation. Rather than attempting to dominate circumstances, awareness learns to move with them, adjusting gently as conditions change. Challenges are met with steadier attention. Successes are appreciated without grasping. Life feels less like a struggle against unpredictable forces and more like a continuous dialogue with them. The sense of self continues to soften. Identity remains present but less rigidly defined. Personal history becomes a narrative thread woven into within complex learning processes rather than permanent marks of failure. Relationships deepen through attentive presence. Listening becomes more important than reacting. Shared silence feels comfortable rather than awkward. There is appreciation for the subtle emotional currents flowing beneath words, shaping communication in ways language alone cannot capture. Moments of solitude grow especially nourishing. Being alone offers space to feel the gentle hum of existence without distraction. Awareness senses its own presence more clearly, like hearing a quiet melody previously drowned out by noise. In these peaceful intervals, the boundary between inner and outer experience feels almost transparent. Nature continues to serve as a mirror for deeper understanding. Watching wind move through leaves reveals patterns of influence that are invisible yet undeniable. Flowing water demonstrates how persistence can be gentle yet transformative. Shifting clouds illustrate constant change unfolding without resistance. Each natural process quietly reflects the same principles shaping human experience. Over time, awareness becomes comfortable with not knowing. Questions remain, but they no longer demand immediate answers. Mystery becomes a companion rather than a puzzle. There is quiet appreciation for the fact that existence contains layers far beyond intellectual reach, and that this vastness enriches rather than diminishes lived experience. Even time feels friendlier. The past is accepted without longing to rewrite it. The future is approached without excessive anticipation. Attention settles more fully into the present, where experience actually unfolds. Each moment feels like a point of gentle contact with the continuous flow of existence. In this steady presence, glimpses of deeper vastness still arise, but they no longer overwhelm. They appear like distant lightning illuminating the horizon for an instant, reminding awareness of a measurable scale while allowing daily life to continue undisturbed. A quiet gratitude begins to replace earlier tension. The opportunity to exist, to perceive, to feel and reflect, seems quietly extraordinary. Awareness recognizes that even limited perception is a rare and delicate gift within the broader fabric of reality. And so the journey that began with unsettling curiosity settles into peaceful attentiveness. Nothing dramatic announces this arrival. There is only a gentle sense of alignment between inner awareness and outer experience. Life continues as it always has, simple, layered, and quietly profound, moving like a calm river whose depth is felt without needing to see the bottom. At a certain point, the journey inward and outward becomes indistinguishable from simply living. The search that once felt intense and consuming dissolves into a natural rhythm of awareness that accompanies each moment without effort. There is no longer a sense of moving towards some distant revelation. Instead, insight arises quietly within ordinary experience, like reflections appearing naturally on still water. The mind grows comfortable with subtlety. Grand explanations and dramatic realizations lose their appeal, replaced by appreciation for small, consistent clarity. A calm morning carries as much depth as any profound meditation. The steady ticking of time feels less like something slipping away and more like a gentle reminder of ongoing presence. Awareness rests easily within the flow of events rather than trying to step outside them. Perception, once strained by the effort to grasp vastness, becomes softer and more receptive. It no longer reaches outward with urgency but opens gently, allowing impressions to arrive without resistance. This openness creates a sense of quiet intimacy with surroundings. Everyday environments feel less like backdrops and more like living contexts shaped by countless interwoven influences. Thoughts slow slightly, gaining space between them. In that space, awareness senses a background stillness that has always been present. This stillness does not interrupt activity, it supports it, like silence supporting music. Even during busy moments, a subtle calm remains accessible beneath the surface of attention. Emotional life reflects this balance. Feelings arise fully but pass more freely, like clouds moving across a wide sky. Joy is experienced without clinging, and sadness without collapse. Each emotion becomes part of a natural cycle rather than a defining condition. The mind learns to trust this rhythm, recognizing that stability comes not from suppressing change but from allowing it to unfold. Human connections gain gentle depth. Interactions feel less transactional and more participatory, as if each conversation contributes to a shared field of understanding. Lists remain meaningful, yet they are pursued with lighter attachment to outcome. Effort becomes a form of engagement rather than a desperate attempt to secure identity. Success and failure lose their harsh edges, appearing instead as variations within a continuous process of growth. Nature's quiet patterns remain a steady source of grounding. Observing the gradual shift of daylight, the patient growth of plants, or the rhythmic return of seasons reinforces a sense of participating in cycles far older and wiser than personal concerns. These patterns offer reassurance that change does not imply disorder but reflects deeper harmony. Silence feels especially rich now. It is no longer an absence waiting to be filled but a presence offering space for awareness to settle. In stillness, perception widens gently without strain, touching faint hints of the immeasurable depth underlying existence. These hints feel natural, neither startling nor overwhelming, like distant mountains blending into the horizon. The sense of self becomes lighter, more flexible. Identity is still present but no longer feels confined to rigid definitions. Personal history is seen as a flowing narrative rather than a fixed structure. This perspective encourages patience with one's own evolution and compassion toward the journeys of others. A quiet trust in life's unfolding deepens. The need to predict every outcome fades, replaced by confidence in the resilience of awareness itself. Even uncertainty feels less intimidating, approached with curiosity rather than resistance. Mystery becomes a familiar landscape rather than uncharted territory. Time continues its steady passage, yet it no longer feels like a force pulling experience away. Instead, it resembles a gentle current carrying moments forward in a continuous stream. Memory and anticipation soften their grip, allowing presence to anchor attention more fully in what is here now. Occasionally, awareness senses faint echoes of the profound vastness once encountered more intensely. These echoes arise naturally, like distant music drifting through open air. They no longer disrupt ordinary perception but enrich it, adding subtle depth to simple experiences. Gratitude emerges quietly from this balanced way of being. Not dramatic thankfulness tied to specific events, but a steady appreciation for existence itself, for the opportunity to perceive, to reflect, and to participate in the ongoing flow of life. In this calm integration, nothing needs to be added or removed. Experience unfolds with gentle completeness, neither lacking nor overflowing. The ordinary reveals itself as quietly extraordinary when seen without constant striving. And so awareness continues forward without urgency, resting comfortably within the living moment, like a traveler who has stopped searching for distant horizons and learned to appreciate the ground beneath each step. There comes a gentle maturity in awareness when experience no longer feels like a problem to solve or a mystery to conquer, but a reality to inhabit fully and thoughtfully. The long inner journey that once seemed to stretch toward unreachable horizons gradually settles into a quiet understanding. Depth has always been present, woven into the fabric of ordinary life. Nothing new needs to be discovered for existence to feel meaningful. Instead, meaning reveals itself naturally through attentive presence. At this stage, perception becomes both simpler and richer. The mind stops chasing complexity and begins appreciating clarity. A moment does not need to be extraordinary to feel complete. The soft glow of late afternoon light, the distant murmur of everyday activity, or the gentle rhythm of walking become sufficient experiences in themselves. Awareness rests easily in what is here, without the constant urge to reach elsewhere. This calm attentiveness changes how challenges are met. Difficulties still arise, but they are approached with steadier breath and wider perspective. Problems no longer feel like personal confrontations with an unfair world. They appear instead as natural movements within the broader flow of existence. This shift allows response without panic, effort without inner turbulence. Thoughts grow less crowded. The mind learns to release unnecessary repetition and quiet mental noise. What remains is clearer, more deliberate reflection. Silence between thoughts becomes comfortable, even nourishing. In those quiet mental spaces, awareness senses the same gentle stillness that underlies all experience. Emotional balance deepens as well. Feelings are neither suppressed nor exaggerated. They pass through awareness like changing seasons, each with its own tone and texture. There is room for joy without fear of losing it, and space for sorrow without becoming with care rather than impulse. The presence of others is valued without the need to control or impress. Shared moments feel authentic because attention is undivided, resting fully in the exchange rather than drifting toward distraction. Ambition softens into intention. Actions are guided less by restless striving and more by thoughtful purpose. Effort continues, yet without the heavy pressure of proving worth or securing permanent recognition. Achievements are appreciated, but they no longer define identity. There is freedom in allowing work to be meaningful without demanding that it be monumental. Nature's quiet companionship becomes even more comforting. Watching evening shadows lengthen or feeling a cool breeze against the skin brings gentle reassurance. These experiences remind awareness that life unfolds through countless subtle interactions, most of which require no intervention. The world moves gracefully on its own, and participation within it need not be forced. Solitude feels complete rather than lacking. Being alone offers space to reconnect with the simple fact of existing. There is ease in sitting quietly, breathing steadily, and observing thoughts drift by without attachment. In these peaceful intervals, awareness senses the quiet continuity that runs beneath all activity. Time, once a source of urgency, now feels like a patient companion. Moments arrive and depart without sharp edges. The past is remembered with acceptance rather than regret, and the future is approached with openness rather than anxiety. Presence becomes the natural center of attention, where life is directly experienced rather than mentally rehearsed. A gentle humility anchors this way of being. Awareness recognizes the limits of human understanding without frustration. Not knowing becomes comfortable, even appropriate, within a reality so vast and intricate. Questions remain open, but they no longer demand immediate closure. Occasionally, a quiet sense of wonder arises without warning. It may come while observing the night sky, hearing distant laughter, or noticing the delicate details of ordinary surroundings. These moments carry a subtle reminder of the immeasurable depth underlying everyday life, yet they arrive softly, without overwhelming intensity. Gratitude flows more steadily now, less tied to specific outcomes and more connected to simple participation in existence. The opportunity to see, to feel, to think, and to share moments with others feels quietly remarkable. Nothing extraordinary needs to occur for appreciation to arise. In this gentle equilibrium, awareness no longer seeks dramatic transformation. Growth continues, but in subtle, organic ways. Insight appears naturally through living rather than through forceful pursuit. Life becomes a quiet practice of presence, attentive, balanced, and unhurried. The surface of experience is appreciated without forgetting the depth beneath it, and the depth is respected without needing to fully explore it. And so existence unfolds like a calm horizon stretching endlessly ahead, not demanding arrival at a final destination, but inviting each step to be taken with steady attention and quiet acceptance. As awareness settles into this steady way of being, life begins to feel less like a journey toward something and more like a quiet unfolding of what has always been present. The restless urge to reach a final understanding fades, replaced by a calm recognition that existence does not require a concluding explanation to be meaningful. Each day arrives not as a step toward a distant destination, but as a complete experience in itself. There is a gentle completeness in ordinary routines. Waking, moving through familiar spaces, engaging in simple responsibilities, these actions no longer feel repetitive or mundane. They form a subtle rhythm that grounds awareness in the present. Repetition reveals quiet variations, and those variations bring a sense of living texture to daily life. Nothing feels wasted when attention is fully present. The mind grows increasingly comfortable with simplicity. Complex questions may still arise, but they are approached without tension. Not every thought demands resolution. Some can simply exist, like clouds drifting across a wide sky without altering its openness. This ease reduces inner friction and allows awareness to remain clear and receptive. Perception becomes more direct. Instead of constantly interpreting and evaluating, the mind allows experience to appear before labeling it. This creates a subtle intimacy with the world. Colors seem more vivid when not filtered through expectation. Sounds feel richer when heard without distraction. Even quiet moments carry a fullness that once went unnoticed. Emotional life continues to move in gentle waves. Emotional weather changes on its own, and that stability lies in observation rather than control. Human connection deepens through presence. Conversations are experienced more fully when attention rests with the speaker rather than wandering toward internal commentary. Simple companionship becomes meaningful without the need for constant stimulation. Shared silence feels comfortable, supported by mutual understanding rather than filled by obligation. Personal identity softens further. The sense of self becomes less rigidly defined by past events or future ambitions. Instead, identity feels fluid, shaped gently by ongoing experience. There is less pressure to maintain fixed roles or defend carefully constructed images. Authenticity arises naturally when awareness no longer clings tightly to self-definition. Nature remains a quiet teacher of this balance. The steady movement of rivers, the patient growth of forests, and the gradual transitions of seasons demonstrate how change unfolds without strain. Observing these rhythms encourages trust in life's own timing. Growth does not need to be forced, it occurs through steady participation. Silence becomes increasingly valuable. It offers space for awareness to rest and renew itself. In stillness, the subtle hum of existence becomes perceptible, a quiet reminder that life continues beneath thought and activity. These moments of rest feel nourishing, like returning to a natural inner home. Time feels softer now. It no longer rushes relentlessly forward but flows at a pace shaped by attention. When awareness is present, moments feel spacious and sufficient. The pressure to hurry eases, replaced by a quiet confidence that what needs to be done will unfold in its proper time. A deeper acceptance of impermanence also settles in. Experiences are appreciated without needing to hold them tightly. Endings no longer carry the same sharpness because they are seen as natural transitions rather than abrupt losses. This perspective allows appreciation to deepen without fear of change. Gratitude continues as a gentle undercurrent. It arises not from extraordinary achievements but from simple participation in existence. The ability to perceive, to reflect, and to share moments with others feels quietly remarkable. Appreciation becomes a steady presence rather than an occasional reaction. Questions about existence remain, yet they feel lighter. Mystery is no longer something to solve but something to live alongside. The vastness underlying reality is sensed as a quiet backdrop, offering depth without demanding constant attention. Awareness now moves with life rather than against it. Effort exists where needed, but without strain. Rest comes naturally when activity ends. Balance develops not through rigid control but through attentive adjustment. In this calm continuity, the extraordinary and the ordinary are no longer separate categories. Every moment holds subtle depth when met with steady presence. Life feels neither overwhelming nor empty, but quietly complete in its unfolding. And so awareness continues forward gently, like a traveler walking at ease through an open landscape, no longer searching for distant landmarks, content to experience the path exactly as it appears beneath each unhurried step.